I spend a lot of time outside of this country, and people tend to focus on the problems we have. We have some real problems we're dealing with today in our economy, but I can assure you that I can find no major country that doesn't have more problems and more serious problems to deal with in the United States. And our workers are the most productive in the world. If in industry after industry, you give them a chance, they will win. But it really comes down to giving them the policies they need to be successful. And what I've seen since being in my position is there's a huge focus on competitiveness right now, both political parties at the federal level, the state level, cities, the regions. And when people think in terms of competitiveness, they, to some it's the tax system, legal, regulatory system. Others, and in many people, it's all of these, research and development, investment in infrastructure, education, K through 12, job training for workers. With me, my big focus, and what I'm going to emphasize a little bit today, is keeping this country open to foreign investment and to trade, because we've always welcomed foreign investment, always welcome trade, welcome competition, because it creates jobs, leads to higher wages, leads to higher standard of living. It really very much benefits this country. That the competition leads to a more innovative, dynamic capitalism. Helps us deploy investment that really drives productivity, which ultimately drives the standard of living. Now, foreign direct investment is, as I've found, even though tends to be sometimes a backlash of public sentiment against it, it's an easier argument even to make than trade, because a foreign direct investment creates jobs. We have about 5 million jobs in this country associated with foreign-owned companies. Those jobs have a higher wages, 25 to 30% higher than the average, and those companies have a disproportionate share of just about everything good: output, investment in R&D. So it is an important story to tell. I don't think it's a difficult story to tell, but it's sometimes, again, there's more of a backlash than I'd like to see. Trade is, to my great concern, is becoming more difficult to sell to the public and to sell to our Congress. And there's some people that would like to argue that despite the fact that this country has benefited so much through trade, and it's just really helped keep our economy strong, that somehow or other that these economic laws are repealed by globalization. And again, I think the evidence is pretty clear that trade leads to more productivity, better jobs, and a higher standard of living. But when you're dealing with trade, people can see the dislocations. They see the hardships, they see the job losses, they're obvious, and the benefits and the additional jobs and the higher standard of living is less visible. And so it's much more important, I think, that we make the case for trade. And one of the things that I've noticed is that some of those jobs that are being lost aren't being lost. Many of them aren't being lost to trade. They're being lost to technology and automation, but no one says, let's turn back technology, let's turn back automation, let's shut off the internet. And the example I use was manufacturing, and that in if you go back to 1950, we had roughly 14 million manufacturing jobs in this country, which were roughly 30% of the total jobs. Today, we've got roughly the same number of jobs, and they're now about 12 or 13% of the total jobs. But when I ask people, I will often say to people, who's the biggest manufacturer in the world? And they're usually wrong, because we are far and away the biggest manufacturer. We're twice as big as Germany, bigger than Japan, 2.5 times bigger than China. And what we find is these jobs, these 14 million jobs, have now got 7 times the output that they had in 1950. And I saw it real time. Matter of fact, when I was working in Chicago and running the investment banking business for Goldman Sachs here, I used to go through manufacturing plants all the time. And in the early days of my career, I'd see a lot of workers. And later, I saw fewer workers and a lot of robotics and a lot of automation. So again, it is, but this being open to trade is really benefited. Now, I'll just tell you right now, the biggest contributor by far to our economy is trade. And over the last 4 quarters, real exports have been up 9.5%, and imports have been up a little bit less than 1%. So again, trade is important, and I tell you, isolationism is not going to do us to do anything other than to cut off U.S. workers from opportunities around the world and lead to lower wages and fewer jobs.